You're nervous? Why?
My heart's beating out of my chest.
Welcome back to the Hunting Public Podcast, everyone. We got a busy episode tonight. We're going to be discussing some mapping tactics. We actually get requests all the time on Facebook and Instagram. And for those of you that don't follow us on on Instagram, please go over and follow us at the Hunting Public, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One of the main questions that we see a lot from you guys is folks sending us maps of their properties or wanting us to discuss mapping their properties. Mm-hmm. And we do some consulting work where we actually go to the field. We're going to be going this Saturday, right?
Yeah, yep.
Down to Matt's place.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see.
Yeah, down in Missouri on a consulting trip. We're going to go down there to his property and kind of walk him through that place and where we think some good stand locations are at.
It's always fun to just go somewhere new and see what other people are dealing with. I think you can learn a lot no matter where you go, even if it's not a spot that you're going to hunt.
Oh, yeah.
Is it a pretty similar area to like where you've hunted before and stuff like that, like terrain-wise and stuff?
It is. It's about a 200-acre property, and we're going to go down there, the three of us actually, and scout with Matt all day and just kind of go through our progressions with him on how we scout a new property, and identify the areas that we want to hunt in. But we also get lots of other requests just, via Facebook or Instagram, whatever, where people send in their maps and want a few quick tips and that sort of thing. So tonight we're going to take a viewer's map that they sent us from the Northeast.
Yep.
Ryan Chelius, I think, is his name. And he sent us a map of some public property that he's hunting up in the northeast part of the country. It's kind of marsh-type terrain, and we're going to dive into that property. Having never set foot there, we
just going to give it our best.
Yeah, I mean, guess. we could be completely wrong on our conclusions, but we have seen this type of habitat and terrain before.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of dive into that. And
the marsh stuff looks real similar to a lot of stuff in Wisconsin, I'd say.
Yeah.
And there is stuff around here that's really similar. And I know in Nebraska, where Brody's from, I've hunted similar stuff to that in Nebraska. Yep. So, I mean, you can probably find it in most states, I guess, that have whitetails.
Yep. And throughout the podcast, as usual, we want everybody to comment below, whether you're on Facebook or Instagram. Let us know what kind of questions you have, what you've been up to lately. We want to know what you guys are doing, like if you're finding any sheds, what is turning up in your postseason scouting. So if you have any questions throughout the entire, podcast.
I got a question. I maybe just drop in what people that are viewing, I guess, what percent would you say have dropped, I guess? Because it definitely does vary.
As far as shed antlers?
Yeah, area to area, it definitely does vary.
Well, after going shed hunting with Ted last weekend, I'm sure that it's probably about 50, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I was out.
But I mean, you see other people post on social media and whatnot that are running trail cameras, so like they have a decent idea. Like if you're running it over a corn pile or something, kind of.
Yeah, and Luke Nissen was texting me the other day. He went down to, those same small proproperties where he killed his buck last fall, and he said all the bucks on camera in the last 2 weeks have antlers still.
See what other people are seeing state by state and whatnot. Maybe just drop the percentage in what state you're in.
I was out the other day and was walking around and bumped into a bunch of 6 or 7 does, and there was a buck in there, a nice 4x4, but he was still holding
both sides.
Yep, both sides.
Yeah.
That was 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And you found two decent sheds in a bean field yesterday, right? Or
yep.
The day before?
It's where we gun hunted in the second season, and I think me and Sean actually filmed that buck out in that same bean field. And I was able to find that match set yesterday when I was walking
right
around.
next to each other?
Yep, one was right on the field edge, and then one was probably 50 yards in front of that, just out in the bean field.
Yeah, there's a good... What are you laughing about, Craig?
Just mustache comments.
Oh, yeah, I'm surprised we haven't got anything on the crappie shirt. Have you wore that before?
I don't think so. A lot of Goodwill specials.
I don't know, but it's freaking amazing. So
Goodwill and knowing a lot of elderly people. They always seem to have the coolest clothes. Somebody asked where Zach is. He's in Colorado visiting a friend. So he'll be gone till next Monday or Tuesday, I think. Lucky him.
Yeah, I'm sure he's having fun.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we're still here. We're still here grinding. Greg's back there with all of his screens going and his editor, and he's working his magic, and Zach's out playing in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you do? Yeah, we got a busy show though. So we're also I forgot to mention we're gonna discuss that big 9-pointer. We've had a lot of questions about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
That Brody and I encountered on public in the middle of November.
Mm-hmm.
That was a buck that we were kind of hunting in that area, and there's been a lot of questions on whether or not he survived and what we were gonna do there. And we recently went out on a scouting trip out on that property and found a bunch of cool stuff that we're going to discuss in today's episode. So the first thing though that we want to dive into, and as we mentioned earlier, if anybody has any questions as we're going, please submit them in the comments below. That way we can get to them during the podcast. This is Ryan's property that he sent us from up in the Northeast, and it's a public property. I don't know exactly how big it is, but it's a big square chunk. And this is basically the overview of the property. You can see that it's marshy type terrain throughout the center of it, and I don't know what type of vegetation that is along the edge of the marsh there, Jake. I mean, it looks like a lot of the stuff that's up in
just
Wisconsin.
dogwood and smaller willows and shrubs and stuff like that. It looks like just any smaller
good bedding cover.
Yeah, for sure.
And we've marked the bedding basically all throughout the marsh. And one thing that I went ahead
maybe just explain for the podcast's sake, people that are just listening, how it lays out, how it kind of just drops down into the marsh there.
Right. It all looks fairly flat.
Yeah.
In general. You've got hardwoods up on the slightly higher elevations around the edges of the marsh, and those drop off into the marsh, and where it drops into the marsh, there's a very distinct transition line where lots of habitat types are coming together. You know, and that's where a lot of those dogwood and stuff are starting to grow up and in there.
Yeah, it's not too wet for stuff to grow, whereas if you get out in the middle of the marsh, you kind of find maybe pockets of high ground, but definitely that whole transition is usually just loaded in nice bedding.
Yeah, and we've marked the transitions on here real rough. I just threw some stuff up in Photoshop, but this is basically the main transition of this property. And we're always talking about bedding, and on public properties we're talking about creative access. We'll come back to this map later on when we're discussing creative access, but one reason we know that the marsh is bedding is from past experience, but also Greg's going to zoom in here on a tighter image of that marsh. You know, and it's a lot of times in Wisconsin you're dealing with lots of cattails, and this looks similar to that.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of marsh ground are pretty much the same, I guess.
Yeah.
It might be different types of vegetation you're dealing with, but really the way they bed is generally the same.
And here you can see this is a tight shot of the marsh itself. And for those just listening, we're showing the viewers right here all these trails, these spider webs of trails that you can see from an aerial photo.
That's what's cool about marsh ground, I think, is just because the trails get so beat down in that wetlands. It's pretty fun to map scout it. And
there's no overhead cover to block your aerial view.
So you can tell exactly where those deer are walking.
Yeah, and you can even see from this tighter image how there's some trails that are spider webbing out. Kind of looks like bicycle wheels in different spots.
It can be misleading, though, I think, because the deer don't really have to walk down those trails that many times to beat a trail through like a cattail marsh. I mean, pretty much you walk down it a couple times, there's going to be a pretty good tunnel going through it.
Sure. But what we're looking at in the middle of this marsh are just slight changes, shrubs, trees, and we're paying attention to these spots that look like bicycle wheels, where a bunch of trails converge. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's bedding right there, but it's possible.
There's some sort of hub there.
Right. It's some sort of travel hub, whatever. And it's something to keep an eye on. But the reason why we're zooming in on this bedding first off is because in this particular area, this is where we're guessing a mature buck is going to be living. He's going to be in this marsh somewhere bedded. So from that point on, we're going to work outward. And just looking at the map, from a bigger picture, you've got those transitions that are going around the edge where the hardwoods meet. And like we said, that's what we're primarily going to be scouting.
Yep.
And there's there's one in particular along the west edge of this marsh that is kind of like a finger of trees.
Mm-hmm.
You see it there?
Yep.
It's almost, it's not an island,
No.
but it's just like a peninsula that sticks out into the marsh.
Yep.
And there's a drainage that runs through the center of this thing, and that drainage comes by the end of that peninsula point.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and the next image that we'll be using is that second image, Greg, where it's going in on a tight shot of that peninsula. But that's something to really look for in these marsh type areas, especially where you have that real good hard transition, is where those points and those peninsulas jut out, or islands even. I mean, Dan Infalt's constantly talking about islands and those and cattail marshes, and has great luck hunting them.
If you do have an area, a lot of marshland around you, and I guess this can go with any type of habitat, but I mean, you look at it enough on an aerial and then just go to those spots, eventually you can just exit out a lot of spots that aren't even worth going to, really. I mean, if you look at it on a computer beforehand, you can save yourself a lot of walking. You can pretty much just go right to those spots that you have an idea that are going to be good and just kind of cross them off as you go.
Yeah.
If they're spots you want to hunt or not.
And this particular spot grabbed my attention immediately. He zoomed in on it here, and I've kind of generalized the bedding out in the marsh there, but there's so many little pieces that come together.
Mm-hmm.
You have that peninsula that juts out into the marsh, and then you see that's that dogwood type stuff that you're talking about on the north edge of the peninsula. And all around through that stuff, you can see trails.
Yeah.
You know, weaving through there.
Mm-hmm.
They've got this, you know, almost this little wash down through the middle of it.
And it looks like there's vegetation all around that wash, too.
Right. Like they could bed very possibly.
Any sort of high ground by that. It might be some sort of high ground right next to where that water or that creek runs through, too.
There's lots of beds, or, well, shouldn't say beds. There's lots of trails coming from that. And what you end up with a lot of times in these situations is in this island, you've got hardwoods and you've got, you know, food source on there.
Yeah.
Not to say they won't browse in the marsh, they will.
Yeah.
But especially, you know, deer eat different things at different times of the year.
Yeah.
You know, if there's acorns on that peninsula and you catch them right when they're dropping, even if it's early in the season, if there's bucks that are bedded out here in this dogwood kind of mixed habitat to the north, or they're out in the actual cattail marsh. I'm not sure if it's cattails or not.
Yeah.
But if they're out in that actual marsh, I mean, it could be the same difference. They're the first place that they're gonna go once they get up out of their bed, if those acorns are dropping early in the season, is out onto that peninsula.
It's pretty similar. I mean, it's a different type of habitat, kind of, but it's pretty similar to the setup that you guys we were talking about last week with that Missouri buck. I mean, he's basically just kind of bedded down in the low ground, and then there's a food source right above him that he's going up to every night.
The trick here is getting close enough, and since, you know, this is the next step. Once you identify this spot, you've got to go out there and put boots on the ground and scout that transition, go out into the marsh if possible, like looking for raised areas, high spots, try to identify the actual beds and see how close you can get to them. You know, I'm not sure how far away it is from the end of that point to that channel of water. You know, if that's 300 or 400 yards and there's a buck bedded up against that, then you may be out of luck sitting on the end of that point even.
Yeah, that's what's tough about that wetland stuff. I mean, a lot of times they're bedding somewhere so far away from your typical spots you're going to want to sit. Like
in that case, you might have to take, you know, 2x12 out there with you and stand on it in the marsh.
I haven't done it a lot, but like I've got some really hardcore public land buddies up in Wisconsin that's what they're doing. They're just getting right down in the cattails, and you're looking at a specific trail basically the whole time. Hoping that one deer comes by. You know.
The thing is they're loud coming through there.
Yeah.
Like you can hear them
sloshing.
Well,
the thing is,
stuff.
You're loud getting out there too, and that's what's so difficult is about getting close to them when they're bedded up, like say under like a lone tree on a high spot out in the middle of a marsh, and you're trying to get within however close. I mean, they can hear you coming from a mile away if it's calm at all, you know. Yeah, and
so the one other thing to point out here is you've got the bedding on the right side of the screen, to the east or the north of that point. A lot of folks may want to hunt that point on an east wind blowing out of the bedding, but the ideal winds to hunt that thing on are just off winds.
Yeah.
You know, And we've got just potential stands thrown up there onto the screen.
And a big buck's probably going to be pretty careful about how he approaches that island or that peninsula of trees too.
Yes.
I mean, he's probably going to try to get downwind of a lot of it before he crawls up on that thing if he's been pressured a lot. You know?
Like what I was mentioning about the wind, you can see that dot that I made on there for a potential stand. And I, like I said, having never set foot there, these are all just guesses. So I was thinking though you could potentially set up right there on the edge of the island with a north wind or even a north-northwest wind blowing out here, and then they come on to the point right here and feed to the center, and you get a shot. You know, and the same goes for the little dot on the opposite side of the island. You just have to see how the wind plays in that that spot.
And that'll depend on when you scout it where you think the bucks are bedding or just whatever deer you're trying to kill or bedding, I guess.
Right.
This might be kind of taking just a bit of a step backwards, but when we looked at that broad picture and you showed all that was bedding, how does someone like start? Because I kind of see that and I'm like, all this is bedding. How do I know like where to even set up close to that? I mean, you pinpointed that kind of peninsula with the acorns, but like, how do you know where to set up along there when all of that's bedding?
Well, it's not necessarily all bedding.
Yeah, okay.
It's
but like
all
they could
potentially
almost
bedding.
be anywhere.
Right. The first place that jumped out at me was that peninsula. And the reason being is because there's lots of diversity around that. And you can't, from the wide view, there's a couple of spots that you see, but then you have to drill in deeper.
And how was that for access? Just because I didn't look at the view.
And that was something else I needed to touch on. Most of the hunter access looks like it's coming from the east here.
Okay.
And I could be wrong, and I don't know. I mean, he does, having hunted here before. But from the west, it doesn't look like there's a lake to the west. You know,
Okay.
There's some blockage over there, and I don't know how many could come in from that direction to get back on that point. And like we're always saying, you want to be able to catch bucks moving up during the daylight. And if I'm a buck and I'm bedded in the middle of that thing somewhere or along that dike or anywhere right in here, that's going to be the safest place to traverse onto.
Yeah.
You know, is onto the middle of that point. You know, because they can see everything around them from there. It's different than them just going straight into a straight wall transition. You know, on that point, they can come out there and feed on that thing and be looking straight down the point. There's only one way of predators coming in there.
Well, and,
and they can escape into the marsh.
And having the wind blowing, anything that's blowing west at all really is blowing right.
Oh yeah, it sets up perfect for west bedding. Yeah. But that's why we're hunting it on just off winds. You know, if it's a west,
that deer has to feel comfortable moving onto that peninsula during daylight, and he's not going to probably do that if the wind's different.
Now that was just one example there, Brody, and the other one that I like is these little islands off of the point of trees over here. Like those could potentially have buck bedding in them as well, or be good spots to set up. Even up here at this end, there's another point
when I watch
and peninsula that kind of comes out. There's 3 spots that jump out at me on that map anyway. There's a road up here, there's some houses, sorry about that, and you know, on the north side.
Yeah.
But it looks like the highest concentration of variable food sources. You know, you got some hay fields or ag fields up here. You got, you know, hardwoods down through here, hardwoods, and the same thing on the west side. So east and west of the marsh looks like feeding areas potentially. So that was where I was looking at.
I guess
first.
The way I might approach it, and I know when I've watched Dan Infalt's marsh scouting videos, how he approaches it too is he'd pretty much just you walk the transition, and like you might be wrong about some things, but you're probably going to stumble across something else when you walk that transition that you might have never.
Oh yeah,
saw.
like if you're walking that transition and you cut a couple of great big rubs, then you follow those trails into the marsh. You know, and I would assume that's
when the scouting really pays off. I mean, because you can't always just look at a spot, and we're not saying that we're right. I mean, we're just saying
we may be completely wrong.
An educated guess.
But that transition is a great place to start. I mean, as far as walking and scouting goes. But
people have a couple of questions about how you guys are like thinking that they're bedding in the marsh and not on that peninsula. They think they've kind of said that what they've seen is that maybe the bucks are going to bed on that peninsula. Why do you think that maybe they're in the marsh grass and not on that peninsula bedding?
Well, They may bed on the peninsula. It
I'd
depends
say-
on the situation, but most of the time, if they're out in the marsh, they have deer in between them and that peninsula. Like does will be just off of
I'd
the,
say
off
in
that edge.
maybe a lower pressured area, they'll be bedded on that peninsula. But I mean,
This is a public
I guess
area
the
in
reason that
a
we-
high
I
population
guess
area.
the reason that I think that they're probably in the marsh is because nobody can really hunt them, at least with a bow in that marsh. I mean, unless you're on the ground, it's hard to get close to those things out in the middle of those marshes.
Yeah, they won't feel as comfortable
Yeah.
on those hardwood points.
Mhm.
Now, if they're really thick and there's not a lot of hunting pressure, that's a different story.
Mhm.
But I mean, if you think about it, if there's tons of bedding in the marsh and they can put does in between them and that hardwood point, like the does are going to feed out 1st.
Mhm.
If all is
I think
well
you're going
and
to probably
good, then
find a
they're-
lot of deer sign on that peninsula.
Yes,
you
you will.
can't always let that fool you because you're probably going to find a bunch of scrapes and maybe a couple rubs on that peninsula because that's where those deer are going to first when they get out of those beds. I guess is what we're guessing.
and you're going to find the most deer sign, along that transition that we were just talking about. Like when you're scouting it, you're going to find tons of deer sign there because so much comes together at that point.
Mhm.
But yeah, they definitely seem to favor the marsh in most cases from what we've seen.
Yep.
Could be wrong there. You got another one that you want to ask quick, or
Not right now.
okay? The second spot, I believe, and I think it's image 3. Where were we looking at there? I believe it's that other point
To the north.
to the north of that one.
Mhm.
And I was really focusing on the west edge more so than anything
Okay.
of the marsh.
Mhm.
Because that seems to be the area which would get the lesser amount of hunting pressure.
Okay.
So right here, this is that next little peninsula that was just to the north of the last one that jutted out in there. And it's kind of similar. It's just almost a break in terrain that runs out into the marsh.
Mhm.
And sometimes a bowl can be good too.
Yeah.
That's actually going inland instead of out into the marsh itself.
Especially on those windy days. I know that I guess that kind of makes me think of Missouri too. There's a lot of those bowls kind of in that river bottom we were
Yep.
hunting, and there's tons of beds up in those.
They really
if you get a
favor those.
ridge that pretty much basically that drops down into that bowl, it just kind of keeps the deer out of the wind. It seems like, and I know that we've had a couple people tell us that. What were the names of the guys that were telling you about hunting deer out of the wind on those windy days earlier this fall?
Joe Elzinger?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a genius.
Yeah.
But I mean those guys kill them all the time in
Yeah.
situations like that. But we just pulled up an example here on the screen of how deer will bed in the marsh. And we talked about it briefly a minute ago, how they'll bed on the end of those peninsulas, just out in the marsh cover with wind blowing down the peninsula, and then get up and they'll move out there and feed. Well, this is an example that we've got on the screen right now on Facebook Live, which is basically just that theory, I guess.
Greg Litzinger just commented on Instagram. He said, in New Jersey, these older deer completely avoid trees at all costs.
Yep,
So, I mean,
they're just in the marsh
that's
then.
kind of what we were talking about
Yep.
with deer being in the marsh. So
And
now-
Greg would know. He
Yeah.
talks about the salt frag marshes and stuff up
Yeah.
there all the time, how they'll live down in there. And like we were saying, you may have to get out in the marsh with them
Yeah.
to kill them.
Yeah.
That may
You gotta
be.
get creative. I mean, you gotta do
Yep.
something different than everybody else is doing in a lot of these places to kill mature bucks.
Yep.
If that's what you're after.
But we just pulled up this example quick on how deer will bed in that type of a scenario. Winds coming in from the hardwood point out into the marsh from the west, and deer bedding on the end of that point. Not necessarily in the hardwoods, they're out in the marsh with wind blowing off the point, which makes it tough. That's why you got to hunt them on just off winds.
Yep.
But you can go back to that central view now, Greg, if you want.
Someone has a question about wondering where you guys would sit if you wanted to do an observation sit.
Oh, there's lots of good selections around the edge of that, depending on how tall that marsh is.
Yeah. Yep.
If some of that dogwood and stuff around the edge, if you get up 30 feet in a tree, you may not be able to see
Yeah.
over it. I just don't know.
Yeah, and it kind of depends. Like, we can tell that there's obviously a rise in elevation around this marsh, but we can't tell how big it is. It doesn't look like it's very big, but I know I keep going back to Missouri, but we were hunting that river bottom, and you could get 50 feet up and look down on those marshes, and I know that's what you were doing. Then the next day you called me down there because you saw 3 mature bucks basically.
Yeah.
And you're like, you got to hurry up and get down there. You got to
Yeah.
kill one of these things.
Yeah, and
that is nice when you have an area like that where it's not too thick and stuff's not too tall, and you can get a visual advantage on them and observe what they're doing first before you make their move.
And I'm hoping that's what Ryan can do in this scenario.
Yeah.
You know, in a good observation stand, if there's not bucks bedded up underneath them, would be those trees in the right-hand portion right there. See those little kind of groves of trees off the end of that point? And that may be bedding. I don't know. You know, but like Greg said, there's so much pressure up there that chances are they're out in the marsh. But you may be able to...
Because it's easier to access from the east, so you can crawl way up in one of those trees or something. And
and then just look over the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if you see one, then go in after him.
Yeah.
But I guess what we would do, what I would do looking at that, I guess, is once you scout that transition, you find some big rubs or scrapes or something. Maybe there's some scrapes coming off onto that point.
Yeah.
If you don't know, you can hunt it, and if you don't see anything, you just run a camera there over those scrapes and see if there's a big one coming out of the marsh. And, you know, if he's coming out well after dark, then you know that you got to get into the marsh with him.
Yeah. One thing that I guess is just maybe my opinion, and tell me what you guys think, but I guess what I've seen in flatter ground is... It's not as wind dependent, the beds aren't, because they're not on. They don't depend on a hillside. They can just face a different way in their bed.
Right.
They don't have to go to a different hillside necessarily all the time. And I guess that is one nice thing about being in flatter ground. It seems like during certain periods of the year they can just bed in the same spot for a couple of days, not really depending on the wind.
Dan talks about that a lot
because they're out in the middle of the marsh and they can't really see that far. They're not using their eyes to look out in front of them. They're basically just trying to get themselves secluded where basically they'd hear or smell anything before it would get to them instead of seeing it before it would get to them, I guess.
Right. And Dan's marsh bedding DVDs over on thehuntingbeast.com, they're really sweet for this exact application. Mm-hmm. Like you're talking about how to hunt a marsh that's a few hundred acres in square size and you got hardwoods off the edge of it. I mean, that's exactly what he deals with all the time.
And I think he's one of the guys that you got to look to, but I mean, he's not doing stuff that normal people would do. He's hunting in little trees like this that are sometimes dead, you know.
Right.
I mean,
little bitty.
Yeah. And like most people wouldn't do it just because you feel like you stick out so bad, but it's your only option.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an average amount of hunting pressure on this place, maybe you can get away with hunting that peninsula, depending on where the access is. You know, if there's very little hunter access coming from the west side, you may be able to get away with hunting that peninsula and it being a really good spot along the west edge.
Yep.
If not, though, yes, you're going to have to get creative and get out in the marsh in order to see bucks in daylight.
Yep.
But the other thing I wanted to touch on with this piece is access. You can see at the bottom of the screen, there is this kind of river channel that runs in from land out to the lake. There's a big lake to the west of this piece that this river channel runs into.
Okay.
I don't know how deep that thing is. I don't know if it's even passable, but that's something to think about. Mm-hmm. You know, you may be able to float down that thing in a kayak or take it in waders.
Something I was looking at even before we went back to the zoomed out version, there's that little channel or whatever that goes up right through where those deer are bedding.
Right.
I mean, that might be something you look into too, as long as it's not like that muck that you're just struggling to even get to.
I mean, it may be unsafe, it may be impossible.
Our buddy Eric Barber, literally lost his boots in a marsh in Wisconsin this year. Like, he just left them out there on November 1st, whatever it was. He had to walk back to the car with no boots.
Yeah, he was walking back in there.
Because, that stuff gets nasty sometimes.
Watching his snaps, he was so pissed.
Yeah. He had bucks running all over the place, and he couldn't go hunting because he didn't have boots.
He had a snap in his truck on the way home where he was driving home barefoot.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have boots.
It was cold that day, too, so he walked out barefoot in the cold. Jesus.
Yeah, what a deal. But, yeah, that's just a potential spot for access on that place that people may not be thinking about. They may be coming from the north, the west, and the east, but not from the south out into that marsh, and that might be how you catch a buck by surprise, is using that drainage to access. But that's going to wrap it up for that map. Is there any other questions about the mapping stuff that we should answer, Brody, before moving
I
on?
think that was all of them.
Save them for the speed round.
Yep.
Okay. The next thing we were going to discuss was that big 9-pointer. We actually went in there and backtracked that buck. Scouted. When was that?
More than 2 weeks ago, I'd say. About 2 weeks ago, probably.
And we filmed it all, but we had a few technical difficulties.
We did some Instagram stories that day,
Yep.
though.
And we filmed the whole thing. It would have made for a pretty good video journal, but didn't have any audio on the camera, so it was just me talking mute
Yeah.
the whole time.
Wouldn't be very interesting.
No.
Even less interesting than they
Yeah.
usually are.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how bad that would have been. But anyway, we found some pretty cool stuff. What we do in those situations, that big 9-pointer came in on me and Brody. What day was that? Like the 15th or somewhere along in there in November.
I think so.
And I'd been running the camera right there. We were anticipating him to be bedding at the west end of this little ditch. And he came right out of there. We almost got a shot at him. Didn't work out. But after the season, that's when we wanted to go in there and really find out where that buck was actually bedded at.
I don't know if this will take too long, but I guess I don't know if I've ever even really heard the story about how you guys originally came upon this place, because you've been hunting it for a long time now. I don't know if that'll take too long to explain, but
Yeah, we've been hunting this one ditch on this
had a lot
public
of
area
encounters
since 2012, I think, Greg, is when we were in there. Killed a buck in there and seen tons of mature bucks over the years. We've moved the stand to half a dozen different trees, but all within about 60, 75 yards. It's always been a great spot. And this big buck has been living in there. We saw him in there last year twice in the rut. Hung a camera in there at the end of this ditch, and this ditch is only like 250 yards long, and you're on a 2,000 acre piece of public land, and this buck is living in this little bitty area. We had a trail camera in there. We got pictures of him a bunch of times throughout the month of October, leaving the bedding and going back in. And we already were suspecting that he was living in that ditch just from seeing him in there in previous years. And then getting the pictures of him, then we're like, we're going to see this deer.
Yeah.
Eventually, we're going to see him out of that tree stand. And that was really the only good place that we had in mind to hunt him, though.
Yeah.
So we just focused on that one tree. And sure enough, Brody and I almost got a crack
well,
at him.
maybe go to the first time you and Greg went in there
Oh, yeah.
in the dark. And
The first time Greg and I went in there was the 3rd of November. And we were sneaking in the dark. We were climbing up the tree, and a stick creaked. I had one of my old junky, I don't know what it was, like super cheap sticks that I still have used for whatever reason. Probably won't use them anymore after this. But I got about halfway up the tree, and that stick just went like that. And it was quiet. And it was wet. We got in so quiet, and a huge deer jumped up like 30 yards from the stand and took off running.
You and Greg both agreed that it just sounded big, whatever.
Oh,
There's sometimes where I think
when you hear a deer take off and then blow like
just
that
a
couple times,
just the thump that it makes.
how heavy that he
Yeah.
was when he was running off, and then he was just sitting there blowing for a couple minutes. It's like, man, that doesn't even sound like
when
a
you
deer.
spook as many deer as we do,
You know?
you can kind of learn what.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounded like a steer running through the woods. But we figured it was that buck.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have any other pictures of mature bucks on that
No.
camera all month of October. That was it.
And there was more there because when we kind of started hunting around there later,
We started seeing them
Yeah.
all around that area, but not in that exact little draw.
That is something interesting about like those super old bucks that I guess do have kind of a mean.
They get so tight
Yeah.
into those areas,
I have some footage of the thermals of the. It may be worth talking about why he felt he's living in the
Yeah.
like the.
Yeah, that's true.
And
And that's
talk
what
about-
happened to me and Brody that day. That's I guess we should bring that up. In this particular spot over the years, that's why we keep moving the stand. And it's all in a small area within 100 yards, but we constantly get busted in this spot. And I killed a buck out of there. Actually, that buck right there.
Yeah.
I killed him out of there in 2012, and Pat almost killed another one there the same day. But it's just so finicky for wind out of there.
It's
And when it early in the morning, first light, if there's no wind, your scent goes up. and they don't get you for like
That's
the first
basically
hour and a
the only
half.
days that you guys try to hunt there anymore.
Yep.
Otherwise
If it's a
kind of waste of time.
calm wind, first thing in the morning, especially if it's cold and the barometric pressure is high, your scent tends to hang and even rise over that ditch. And when Sean and I saw this very buck in 2016, I guess, fall before last, he walked right in, right down through the ditch and past the stand at 40 yards just through too much brush for him to get a shot. But it was that exact scenario. Calm, cold, he couldn't smell us. I mean, our wind, milkweed was floating right towards the deer, but it wasn't dropping down into that ditch where he was at and he couldn't smell us. But what has constantly happened in this spot is once the day winds pick up, around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning in the rut, and the wind starts kicking up to 10, 12 miles an hour and more than that, you start dropping milkweed, and it may float away from the ditch for 100 yards, but it always turns and goes right back in there.
Even where me and you sat that day I was with you, we were nowhere near the ditch, and the wind wasn't supposed to be blowing near it, but we would drop milkweed, and like one way or another it would find a way to suck down in that ditch. It's such an odd place.
It just pisses you off so bad. Me and Brody went through like 3 pods of milkweed that day when that buck came in there and busted us. I mean, he was coming right up through the middle of that ditch, and it just makes total sense why he's there, because that wind from all sides is kicking back in there. Maybe not all the time, but you notice when you watch that buck come up through there, he's moving real slow, he's stopping, he's checking things out.
He knows how to use that wind.
He knows exactly how to use that wind.
Because I mean,
like a young deer or a doe or whatever, so they'll just bust right through there.
We've talked about it, but that particular property has more tree stands on it than any other public property I've seen down here.
Yeah, it gets hunted really hard.
Every time we go out there, it seems like we find a new one too. Because when we scouted it, we found however many more that at least I hadn't seen.
This deer is like wise to the act. He knows what humans smell like, and to not be anywhere close to him.
Yeah, because I mean, he got one with you guys, and like it was.
He was gone.
He didn't
out
mess
of there.
around like does and young bucks will sometimes, where they just try to kind of figure out. Like he got one whiff of it. He was like halfway through a stride maybe even, and all of a sudden he's just heading the other way.
A friend of ours got a shot at him actually a few weeks later on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, there's several people.
And it was half a mile from there.
Yeah.
But
there's several people that have seen him down there.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, he moves. I mean, it's not one of those situations, and that's just the thing. Everybody thinks hunting pressure will push a buck to be a nocturnal, and it's just not the case, especially every time.
He's definitely way more careful about how he moves.
He's just very careful about how he moves, and that's why he uses that ditch. Brody and I, after that deer busted us, I'm dropping milkweed in the stand for like 30 minutes. And the wind's hitting me right in the face coming straight from the deer, and the milkweed's blowing up the ridge. I'm like, what in the hell is going on, Like it was ticking me off. But eventually I started pulling my binoculars, and I would watch that milkweed because it would float way up to the head of the ditch, and it would hang there for a few seconds, and then as soon as it gusted the next time, didn't matter which direction it gusted from, it was like a vacuum.
Yeah.
Sucked it right back down the ditch. And finally, me and Brody were like, holy cow, look at that. And all of a sudden, we just see all these milkweed pods floating right down the middle of that ditch that I'd been dropping for 10 minutes. And that's exactly where he got us.
That buck's a prick.
Yeah, I mean,
He was about, 4 steps away from getting an arrow zipped into him?
Yeah, that was full draw. That was a tough one, but...
How many times were you at full draw this year?
Oh, way too many. Way too many times. It was not good.
Yeah.
But...
I guess it is good. I mean,
yeah, you learn a lot from it. But
you'd like to release an arrow, but I mean,
yeah, it's still a cool hunt nonetheless. Just because you learn so much and how those things move through that ditch, with that thermal effect, and especially the time that he chose to move.
Yeah.
That's something I was going to say. I learned from that hunt is we'd sat there all morning and it was late morning, but you turned to me a little bit before that and said this is when the big boys are going to be moving. Yep. Sure enough, I mean, we sat there for even a little while longer.
And that's why we've moved that stand so many times, is constantly you see a great big buck up and cruising through that ditch at 10 in the morning.
Yep.
But usually by that time, the wind is picked up and it's kicking down through there. They know they can move through there and smell what's going on around them and not be in danger.
He even went out of his way to go on the trail that every other deer goes on. He dove under this log, basically.
When we were in there, dude. Yeah. When we were filming that stuff, I mean, we talked about it, but obviously you can't hear us. There is some footage of it, though. where we go up underneath this deadfall and actually walk that buck's trail up to the stand location. And this deer is not on a deer trail. Not on your typical deer trail that you're going to find in the woods.
He was, and then
like
he just
was,
dives
but
off.
then he veers off of it and he takes a completely different route. And he ends up going up underneath of this big deadfall and coming up to 30 yards or whatever. But that's what we did after the season. That is what we do a lot of, and that was backtrack.
And
we
did find something interesting. We found that huge signpost rub.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, that was
just a couple of weeks ago.
I'd
we went in there.
imagine he's put his head on that sucker a couple times the way it looked.
Oh, geez, it was rubbed on all three sides. Did you find any of that footage, Greg?
There was several beds around that.
Yeah,
too.
I have it on GoPro.
And what is that? Maybe 200 yards from where the tree stand is, probably.
Yeah, probably about 200 yards. Okay. But that's what we did.
And that is the direction that he came from.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I would assume that was one of the spots where he was bedding quite frequently, you know. We walked the very trail on that me and Brody saw him coming up out of. And we took it down in there and started looking around. And it took us a little bit, but eventually you yelled, you're like, "Hey, Warb, come over here." I was like, "What, did you find the sheds in this thing or something?" And walked over there and... it found the biggest rub that I've seen in 5 years, you know.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of the rub that we had the camera on all year by where I shot that buck. I mean, that's
and there's just beds all around it.
That's something we might drop a camera on before the season next year and leave it soak all year just to see what we can learn.
It looked like that was his lair that we found.
Yeah.
You know, and it was, how big was it? A quarter of an acre in size, maybe?
Oh, yeah,
Probably, it might be smaller.
And it might be 200 yards from that tree stand, and... you know, I mean, that just, it made total sense for him to be bedding there and living there on multiple wind directions. Because it was the one spot in this whole public area where there's not a tree stand.
Yeah. There is a tree stand maybe
150 yards.
Yeah.
Yep, down the ditch. And then the other tree that we were hunting was 200 yards up the ditch.
We were looking for spots to put it, then there just isn't any options. We're like, well, where can we hunt on the ground, you know?
Yeah. And we tried finding some spots to hunt on the ground to the west of him.
Yeah, that was difficult even.
Yeah.
It's mostly just like younger oaks and just smaller shrubs where, I mean, it's great for deer to bed in, but it's real hard to find a tree to hunt in.
We found one potential location, but I think that it might be one of those spots that you have to hunt of an afternoon. And it's going to have to be the exact perfect situation. It's going to have to be wet out so you can get in quietly.
You said an afternoon?
Yep. It's going to have to be a wind out of the west that's blowing straight up the ditch.
Okay.
So you're not getting anything, because this ditch, for those of you that don't know, runs west to east to west. If you have any northerly wind or any southerly wind, it swirls bad just off of those ridges and down through that ditch. So what I traditionally hunted it on was an east, just very light, and it would take it up over top of the ditch. But I'm thinking the one thing I haven't tried in that spot yet is to hunt it on a west wind blowing straight up the ditch of an evening. And now that we know if he's bedding there again, which hopefully we'll be able to tell next year if him or any other mature buck's bedding there for that matter. If the rubs are opened up coming up out of there, we're gonna know. You know, and we also run cameras in there throughout October. We'll know if we get pictures of a buck in there that's one of his likely bedding spots. But
is there a certain time of year that you would go in there, or just when those conditions are right?
Probably when the conditions are right and when we know there's a buck in there. That's the thing a lot of folks don't understand. These bedding areas, not one of them is created equal. In this situation, he wasn't using that thing all year. You know, we didn't see him after he smelled us in there, and we really didn't see him until the middle of October on the camera.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was a bedding area that he was really using much until the later part of October. And that would explain why we saw him in there last year, too, on November 7th. Or in 2016, I mean.
And he was there. He did show up a couple more times later in the year. I guess, what was it, around Christmas was the last picture. Yeah. So he made it to at least then. So, I mean, chances are good that he made it through the season. I mean, hopefully he'll be there next year. If not, I'm sure there will be a different mature buck in there. There has been pretty much ever since you guys started hunting.
Oh, every year there's a big one in there. I mean, I shouldn't say every year, but it's definitely been a very good spot over the years. And that's the one thing we talk about a lot. You know, if something's not working, try something different.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you right now, I've sat in the head of that ditch enough times and gotten blown out of there by deer that I'm not going to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We got to try something different at this point. And the cool thing was finding that bedding location.
Yeah.
Because it was a spot that we'd suspected for a while. We went in there and actually confirmed that.
Yeah, definitely confirmed it.
So, yeah, I think we might have a plan in place for this deer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Who knows? Or any other buck that's in there. I mean, if I wouldn't have just been hunting him.
No.
Me and Greg almost shot one a lot smaller than him the first time we were in there, but that thing smelled us.
Yeah.
You know, because it's that same time, Brody, it's mid-morning.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't see anything but does and little bucks until 9:30, 10 o'clock. Wind starts blowing, and what do you know? Here comes a nice buck.
Mm-hmm.
And there he goes. But that's whatever. That's what you deal with. But you guys ready for a speed round?
I've
Let's
got
get to it.
I've got a good question that we might address because we were just talking about it. I think last night, Hunter Brunk asked from Brunk Outdoors. He asked if we thought we bounced around too much, and he said with over half of our hunts on public land for the first time, or being into spots for the first time, he feels like they bounced around too much this year, and that's something we were talking about yesterday too.
Yeah, and we probably do. I mean, it depends on what your goals are.
Yeah.
You know, if your goal is to go out there and shoot at some, you know, certain size buck or a specific buck or whatever, it's going to be different. But to be honest, our goals kind of as a group are to learn as much as we can about these areas. We're almost more interested in learning about them and observing how deer use them and mature bucks use them than we are.
And there is so many different types of habitat around here that you can drive 30 minutes like one direction or the other, and you can find a bigger piece of hardwood timber that rolls, or just like a flat river bottom. It's kind of cool, but
I mean, and that's why we bounce. That's one reason why we bounce around so much.
I think if we did stick with a property, I guess maybe this is just my opinion. If we did stick with a couple particular properties, we could probably have better luck on killing mature bucks. But I mean, like you said, we're just trying to learn as much as we can and show people how to hunt different types of habitat, I guess.
Yeah, and we like bouncing around and keeping the pressure light on these places. That is an advantage of bouncing around.
Having all these different spots, like you said, because we're just diving in super aggressive, and I mean, you're either messing it up or you're killing something a lot of times.
We may try to. We have discussed this and thrown this around among the group here lately, though, which we may try to create more of a storyline on these places where we hunt.
Kind of like we did with the buck we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where we just kind of hunt a particular area maybe for a week straight.
Or say we were in Nebraska for whatever it was, 5 days.
And then we just show you the whole progression of hunting that area, whether we're successful or not. And then at the end of 7-8 days, we're like, well, let's go from the Marsh area to the Big Woods.
Yeah.
Or to Missouri or to Alabama or wherever, you know. But let's get into some questions here, guys.
Bradley's wondering, he goes, I'm always scouting and adding spots to the GPS, but as I find more, I'm having a harder time keeping track of them. What do you do to manage your potential or proven spots so you can quickly sort through them when the season comes?
We use Google Earth and pins a lot, like in actual organized folders.
I wish we could show them all the pins that we have dropped on Google without showing them where all the spots are. I mean, because it's just, the pins are yellow, and basically the whole 30-minute circle around where we live on Zach's computer at least is just a pin, one big giant pin.
Oh yeah,
like all the potential.
And that's
spots.
that's how mine was for a long time. You know, at Midwest Whitetail over the years, and I accidentally deleted it. I deleted that file, and I couldn't figure out how to get it back. And I was like, oh, I'm never gonna remember where all those pins are.
Did you cry?
No, but I was really upset about it for sure.
You feel like you got broken up with?
Yeah, I mean, it stunk. Eventually, I figured out where most of them were, but now I know how to save that, and I back up those files. Zach's done it a couple times now where he's lost them too, I think. But
I don't have a lot of questions on Instagram, Brody, so you can just go ahead and shoot.
Where would bucks bed on a 1 mile long ridge that runs north and south, but it doesn't have any fingers or secondary ridges cutting off of it?
I don't know. Maybe not there. Just depends.
They could with no secondary ridges going off of it.
I would assume that it's wind-based bedding. Yeah. And it also depends on the habitat. Say, for instance,
if it is north and south, then I guess I'm just thinking our predominant wind here is west. I mean, they're going to be bedded on the
leeward side.
Leeward side, yeah. So I mean that would set up good for west wind and straight north.
The
and
east
south
side of the hill on westerly bedding,
Yeah.
the west side of the hill on easterly bedding, north
Yeah.
wind would be on the southern tip.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be the areas where we would look initially.
You got any, Jake?
Are you guys ever afraid of giving away your spots, filming, or not showing the maps?
Yeah, we know we'd probably give them away.
Mm-hmm.
We've been giving them away for a couple years now,
Mm-hmm.
but what do you do?
There's a lot of them that
There's-
we have, and a lot
The
of
only
us-
way we can teach you guys and help learn as a group is if we show you the maps.
Mhm.
And then we get your feedback on it and we kind of discuss from there. If we
Mhm.
just try to hide everything, yeah, we might kill more big bucks, but you know,
There's a lot of spots out there we're never gonna.
that's just not as important to us as
I mean, we're finding new
trying to-
spots. That spot that we found where you guys killed the gun box, I guess it wasn't a brand new spot, but I mean, we had never killed bucks there before. And I mean, we've already had comments about that. People saying that locals are watching, and like that's not a very hard spot to find if
No.
you spend a lot of time
the
around.
buck
that
nest has been torched this
Yeah.
year, the original buck nest. You know, if we'd have just kept that under our hat, we probably could have kept going in there and still having good hunts.
Mhm.
Maybe, you never know, it's public land, so it could change at any point. You know, the idea is that you all can watch this stuff and
Apply it
be
to-
able to apply it to your own situation, and it can potentially help you have more success or a better experience. But
Mhm.
you know, sometimes we do get people that come into the spots.
It's public land.
Public land, I mean,
people are supposed to be out there using it.
I mean, ideally we would have more public land
Yeah.
eventually. That would be real nice if we could have that.
Yeah.
You know, more people could,
Mhm.
you know, find a way to vote for it or whatever. But that's another conversation.
Whatever happened to Ray?
Ray Finkel, the buck. Yeah, we didn't see him this year. Ran a couple trail cameras in there. That's the area of the buck nest where we just saw tons of people in there all year. We did
Mhm.
get pictures of a few good ones.
That one that Sean, he was, or I guess not, I was going to say drawn back on, but he was gun hunting and it went down in the creek. And well,
Yeah, that
you guys
deer.
saw that tall, narrow buck a bunch of times, that old
Yep.
looking thing. And he was on the camera, looked exactly the same this year.
Yeah, and there was a couple
Was that
other
big
real
8
big
pointer?
ones. Big 8-pointer was on there.
That thing's a stud.
He was in the buck nest.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the thing on the cameras in there. In 2016, we had Ray Finkel and other bucks, and there were some of them in daylight. And this year, there was just mostly hunters.
Mhm.
And during the rut, we got the occasional buck on
Mhm.
camera, but nothing like it was.
Someone asked if you ever used drones to scout. I don't know if
No, that's not illegal.
not on public. It would be a good idea for private.
I don't know that it's legal to do on private, is it, Greg? I don't
It's a gray area.
know.
To scout, to just fly over your property.
Oh, maybe to fly over your property it's fine, but like
Yeah,
to
not
aid
just-
you during
yeah.
the hunt to
Yeah.
fly over right before you go hunting
Yeah.
and look for deer, I don't
Yeah.
think that's legal. But yeah, I mean, we don't really use the drones to scout. We do film with them though in the off season to try to teach somebody
Mhm.
about, you know, how the spot lays out, sort
Yeah.
of like we do with maps.
Mhm.
In a large bluff or valley system, would you rather be up high on the ridge by crop fields or down the bottom by a creek?
Wind is going to be more consistent up top, I'd say, as far as hunting.
Yeah, just very, I don't know. That's a tough one. It's all going to depend. Every situation is just different. You've got different winds for every day, and if they're bedding down low in the bottoms, like if the majority of hunting pressure is on top, then you may have to hunt them in the bottoms, but you might have to wait for a day when it's really calm, where you're not going to get the swirling.
Mhm.
And like Jake said, hunt them on the top when it's windier.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, it is very spot specific.
Do you ever have trail cameras stolen on public land? Tips for concealing them?
Put 'em
Yeah.
high.
They get ganked a lot.
Put them high if you can.
Yeah, put them high. That's one thing we've had better luck doing the last few years. Is we pack in a couple of those Muddy Pro sticks,
Mm-hmm.
and we just pop up in the tree and
Yep.
and hang the camera 10 feet up in the air, pointed down.
Python locks.
Python locks, yes.
Lock them to the tree with a key.
Yeah, and put them back in their ways. Don't you know if you put it in an area real close to the parking lot? I mean, that's just asking to get them stolen.
Mhm.
Granted, we do at times put them over scrapes along field edges or something to try to get pictures of nocturnal bucks and people
Mm-hmm.
to judge the amount of hunting pressure, but we lock the heck out of those things,
Yeah.
and they still get stolen sometimes. So
Yep.
About 40% of them on public get stolen.
Guy says he has 2 weeks left in Louisiana. Should he be keying in on food sources more than anything at this point? I'd say probably yes.
I
This
don't
late-
know.
this
I
late
don't
in
know
the
if
year.
I can answer that one
This
intelligently
late in the
or
year,
not.
I guess. I mean, I'd probably be keying in on food, but I've never hunted Louisiana.
Yeah, me
either.
neither. I mean, I could just throw some BS out there and it might work, but
Mhm.
I'd rather not give him any answers.
Cold weather, I'd be on food, I guess. Just
Yeah.
hope for cold weather. I know it's cold here now.
We're going to try to get down south and do more hunting, soon. And I'd like to do, I've got some good friends that are experts down there
Yeah.
that I want to get on the podcast here soon.
Mhm.
So hopefully we'll be able to answer more of those
Are we
questions.
doing
in the
any
future.
sort of turkey scouting, or what sort of turkey scouting can you be doing this time of year?
You can do trail camera surveys. Like if you got new properties that you haven't turkey hunted on before, go out, scout, find some tracks, and set up some cameras and see what kind of gobblers you've got in there.
Mhm.
And then hunt those areas in the spring because they won't be far off.
Mhm.
And now you can glass turkeys from a long ways away and
Yeah.
see those big winter flocks occasionally.
Mhm.
And that'll give you an idea of where to potentially hunt this spring.
What's the average size of land you hunt in acres?
It varies. I would say the average public area is 1,500 to 2,000 acres. Is that about right, Greg, you think? But it varies. I mean, we hunt some that are upwards of 30, 40,000 acres in size, and a couple that we hunted this year were 25 acres,
Mhm.
So don't write any spot off
Yeah.
by the
Those
size
spots
or
were
whatever.
overlooked spots with no trees. We were just basically
Yeah.
hunting on the ground, right up next to some good bedding. But I mean, that was late in the year.
Right.
You guys ever hunt near the tops of erosion ditches where it shallows out and gets passable? And you're just wondering, if so, like you approach from the bottom and let the scent blow down it.
Top of an erosion ditch. So you're referring to?
Just the head of a ditch.
Oh, okay. Where it funnels deer movement down. Yeah, we do that fair amount. And that works well, especially in our type of terrain. But it's specific to the terrain. If it's not steep enough, those erosion ditches aren't going to get deep enough to funnel deer movement around the head of them.
Mm-hmm.
Around here, yes, we do.
Yeah.
But that's more of a traditional funnel.
Yeah.
And that can work, but you still got to be close to bedding or right in between bedding areas in the rut, I think, to be successful. But we do hunt those areas under that same situation quite a lot.
That's all I'm saying.
Super Bowl predictions.
Tom Brady's probably going to win the thing. I hope not, but he's probably going to win it because the Patriots are really good and they get all the calls. So.
What do you think, Brody?
I'm hoping Philadelphia wins it.
Yeah.
I'm in the same
too,
boat as
brother.
Warp here.
Me too. I like Nick Foles. He just, man,
He's going to show up and play well.
I don't know. I'm going to watch it, but if the Patriots are winning big at halftime, I'm probably going to go look at some maps. Is that it?
Yeah, that's
Yep.
all I got.
All right, we're good to go. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Sorry if we didn't get to some of your comments. If you got any more, post them below, and we'll try to get to them after the podcast. And please, if you're not following us already on Instagram, go over there and follow our page. There's lots of cool stuff there, as well as the YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.